So in this video, we're going to be looking at some ways on splicing cordage, or connecting two pieces of cordage together in a emergency situation. On my right here, I have basically rope that is 3-strand twisted, and this is splicing that I've done with this. This in and of itself will require a whole video, but I just want to introduce it to you and show you. Now I'm using duct tape to keep the ends from fraying because of the type of cordage that it is. I can't remember what type of rope this is. I don't believe it's hemp, but it's some sort of twisted fibers. And then you just kind of undo them and you rebraid them essentially. And I will dedicate another video to this whole process in and of itself, but just know that it can be done. And I'm gonna give it some real tight pulls here, and it holds. Okay, so we'll work on this at another video, but I'm going to give you let's see, 1, 2, 3, I believe 3 ways of being able to attach cordage. Some of it I've already introduced in some of my earlier videos, and we'll go with the easiest first. And the easiest first is I've got 550 paracord that has been burned together. Okay, it might be hard to see because it's dark, it's black. You probably can't see the splice even if I get it up close. All right, you see that? That's a splice, right? This is synthetic fibers, man-made fibers. Rope 550 means it can hold up to 550 pounds. This cord, some people mistake it for parachute cord. It's not necessarily that. It's 550 cord, and we're just gonna break this again, or we're gonna cut it again because I'm using this as a training tool. So I'm just gonna cut that. And what 550, and I've explained this before in other videos, what 550 cord is versus quote-unquote parachute cord is these white fibers in here, this white part here, these are like 7 strands that you can cut this apart, or you can break this down and you can use them for trap parts or suturing or finer work. Okay, and then the casing can also be used too. So it's like there's like twisted 7 strands in here, I believe that's the number, that are already inside, and then there's a casing around it that's woven around, and then you can extract the white strands and use them for finer work, and I believe you can untwist them so it can even be finer fibers. Again, that's a whole nother video. Then you can use the casing that will end up being flat, and then for different work. And it's in and of themselves, they have their own uses and their own strengths. Okay, so but in case you break your cord, your 550 cord, again not paracord, what you would do is you take an ember from the fire, if you're out camping or something like that, or a lighter, which I have here. Okay, and what you would do, and I have an overhead fan here, but what you want to do is you want to really heat the fibers here, heat the ends, real easy peasy. Just make sure that they're nice and heated, melted, because they're artificial fibers. They're basically nylon or plastic. And then as quickly as possible, you want to take these and mesh these together. And you can probably take, your lighter or your fire tool. Be careful not to burn yourself, because it's artificial. It is hot. And you can probably even take this and kind of make sure that they melt together. That's the whole point. Be careful not to burn yourself, because you will get burned if you're not careful. All right, and in a survival situation, getting burnt, any sort of injury is not good. It's just going to compound the emergency situation. So be careful. All right, but this is what you can do for a quick and dirty necklace, or a clasp. Once it dries, like this piece over here that I actually did off camera, that actually is pretty, it's pretty tight, right? It's pretty staunch. I wouldn't bet my life on this holding my weight, okay? But like I said, for a necklace or a lanyard, this would be a good way to kind of connect this together. And then of course, with enough strength, you could definitely break the seal of the plastic, right? And so here, just to demonstrate, this here, see, this is pretty much melted together, especially the more you let it cool. Okay, it's cool to the touch right now, so you can cool this, and it is a good connector. Okay, in a pinch, again, I'm not going to the tensile strength of 550 cord. Again, that's like 5 to 7 strands inside of a wrapped or woven casing, which adds additional strength. There's a tensile strength of approximately 550 pounds, right? Just for one strand. So you double this up, you get more, right? Or it can hold 1,000 pounds, etc., etc. Apparently, I've never tested this out. This is what I understand. I know this stuff is pretty strong. That's why I like to carry it, because it has multiple uses. You can use the inside strands, and you can use the outside casings, right? So even now, the earlier bond that I created here, I don't know if you can see it on camera here. I'm gonna try to make sure you can see it right there. So I'm gonna see if I can break this, right? So nope. But I'm not going to rely on this sort of thing to hold my weight, which is a good segue to the next knot that I'm going to show you. But again, I'm using a fair amount of strength to try and pull this apart, and it's not working, right? So whenever I see those movies and the villain yanks the medallion off the neck of the protagonist, the hero or the heroine, I'm not buying that. I feel like my head would probably end up headbutting them. That's a whole nother conversation. But anyways, even this one we just made, yeah, that came apart. But I think if I did this better, I took my time with this one here. But as you can see, this did come apart, but at least it did come back together. Which all that means is I just got to take my time and not have an overhead fan blowing my flames and keeping me from really firing these up, so I can make a good seal. But as you can see, it's not something I would, like I said, I would trust my weight or have any sort of trust on the tensile strength of the cordage. Any sort of knot, to be honest, is not to be really trusted like that. So now I just kind of push these two together, and I hold these two together until they cool down. And then, we'll revisit this later and see how strong this bond is. But you got to see both sides. Now, that's what you do with synthetic cordage, perhaps, or something like 550 cord. Okay? We'll set this aside. Okay. Next, when we talk about splicing two pieces of cordage together, if you have two separate pieces of rope, this is one whole loop of rope that I actually like to use to practice my knots. And it's synthetic rope, synthetic fibers here. So meaning that the more organic fibers, when they knot pretty tightly, and so they're hard to undo. So when you're practicing your knot, this sort of like nylon cordage that I've actually had to burn the ends to, just so that they don't fray. is actually good because I can practice my knots and I can undo the knots real quickly, versus a natural cordage. Okay, but anyways, so let's just pretend this is one whole same rope, but let's pretend these are two separate ends here. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to do the fisherman's knot, right? So you have two separate pieces of cordage, and you will basically make an overhand knot. I've already covered this in a previous video. So all it is just a basic overhand knot. And then you take your other piece of cordage and you feed it through the overhand knot like that. And then you can go ahead and cinch that up like that. And then now, here's the tricky part. Okay? So what you do is, so this is part of the overhand knot right here. This end in my right hand, this end right here is part of the overhand knot. This piece is the piece that I've fed through. So please don't get confused, because that's the tricky part. This piece now has to go around what we'll call the standing end, around the standing end, and then make an overhand knot on top of that. So we have a configuration that looks something similar, right? Cinch that, and now what you can do is you can pull these together. It's a fisherman's knot. Okay? And I use this all the time when I go fishing. When my line breaks and I don't feel like going through the whole thing of re-knotting everything, I just do a fisherman's knot. Works just fine. I've caught many fish on a fisherman's knot. That's the term, right? But this is how this works. Okay? So basically, conceptually, what you're doing is you're taking one part of the rope and clasping on, and taking another part of the rope and clasping on, and then cinching them together. Okay? So it's like that. Okay, that's the concept, right? I'll do it again. Alright, and I think I've covered this in a previous video. Under Knowing Your Knots. I got a playlist for that. And I might have explained it better. So we have two different ends. One end, go ahead and make your overhand knot. Okay. The other end goes through the loop, the hole of the overhand knot. Give it some length. Go ahead and cinch this up. Now, the tricky part, or maybe not the tricky part, just the part that most people get confused, is now you take this end and you go around the standing end and you make your overhand knot around that. So you're basically doing like a hand clasp like that. And then you pull them together. Easy peasy. And it works just great. Now, if you want to strengthen this, okay, we'll do this again, and hopefully this will stick even further, because we're going to add an extra twist to this, if you will. Again, we're going to take one end, and we're going to do a double overhand, or and that's once. Do it again, that's twice. You could even triple it if you want to. Same as before, take the other piece of cordage, the other end of cordage, feed it through the hole or the eye, whatever you want to call it, cinch it up. Now, take this end that you just ran through the eye or the hole, right here, and wrap it around the standing end. Do the same thing, right? You're going to wrap once overhand, twice overhand. Cinch it up a little bit and then pull them tight. This is even a stronger fisherman's knot. Okay, so this is double fisherman's knot. It's actually even more stronger, right? In this tends, and when I fish, I tend to use, you know, when I'm just regular fishing, just catching some sunnies or something like that, I just use plastic line or spider wire. It doesn't slip. I use a little bit of spit and put it on there and cinch it up, and I haven't lost a fish on splicing a line together like that. Not yet, at least. You know, even if it's a bigger, you know, bigger fish like a bass or something like that. I've never had a problem. So that's kind of how the fisherman knots work as far as splicing two loose ends of cordage together in a pinch, right? Now, again, just like we did with the 550 cord, your cordage is going to have a weak spot. There's always going to be a weak spot. Here's what we did before, if you can see it. The integrity of the cordage has been compromised. All right, so it's not to really be trusted wholly. Okay, but in a pinch, it'll work. It may hold for light work. Depending on the type of cordage that you're using, those people that are rock climbers and you're using that real heavy duty rope, you know, it may support, you know, heavier weight, but just keep that in mind if you ever have to splice something together. The integrity has been the integrity of the cordage has been compromised. Okay. So what we're going to do next is another way to deal with compromised cordage is make what's called a sheep shank. And this piece of duct tape here in the middle of the cordage that I like to practice with, mainly because it's synthetic, and because it's synthetic, the knots, when you make a knot real tightly, it's easy to make it, you know, undo the knot. Okay, so I like to use this type of rope for that sort of practice and things. At any rate, when you need to shorten a length of cordage without cutting, again, I really don't like cutting cordage, especially if it's cordage that has been that you've taken the time to harvest and process the fibers, which is kind of time and energy consuming. You don't want to cut it, so it's best to figure out ways to shorten it. Or if there are weak points in your cordage, or it's fraying, or it's going to come apart, or a part got cut, but it's still a viable length of cordage, this knot will allow you to still make use of the cordage even though it's been compromised. All right, so this piece of duct tape is going to represent compromise in our length of this rope here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make a Z or an S shape. This cordage tends to have a mind of its own, so forgive it slip sliding away. All right, so we're going to make a Z or an S shape like that, and we want the compromised, if it's compromised, that in the middle. Okay, we don't want it if we're not trying to just shorten the length of rope. Okay, so then next, what we do on this side with this length of cordage here is we're gonna basically start to make like what's called, you know, an overhand knot. So it's gonna start to look like an overhand knot. Okay, so we want something that looks like this. Okay, just like that. But if it was overhand knot, this would come through. The running end would come through. But we're not really doing that. Okay, so I'm just taking this end here, and I'm running it around and then just dropping it down. Okay, like that. All right, then what we do next is, we want this down here that way. It just wants to, like I said, this rope has a mind of its own. Then we want to take this side here, this bite or bend, and we want to go over and under and over like that. Okay, and then we can kind of cinch that up so it doesn't go anywhere. Then on this side we can kind of flip it over. All right, now on this side we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make basically almost an overhand knot, and we want it just to drop down. We don't want to make a full overhand knot. So a configuration that looks like this. Okay, and again, this is the tricky part. So again, if you need to scrub this back a few times, that's fine. Knot making can be kind of frustrating sometimes, but once you get it, you get it. All right, so we want this configuration, and we do the same thing on this side, over and under and over like that. And then we can cinch this up like that, and then we can get it nice and tight like that. And then this, So what you're noticing is we've shortened the length of the cordage. We've shortened the length of the cordage, and but B, most importantly, if there's compromise, or if it's weak here where the duct tape is, there's no strain on that. There's no stress on it. Okay, the stress is mainly on the top and the bottom pieces of cordage, and then obviously on the two ends on my right and left hand here. Okay, so this here you can pull fairly tightly, and it's not going anywhere. And if this was compromised, there's no stress on this piece here. Okay, so that's how it works. That's the sheep shake. An opportunity, I will we'll revisit these, but this time we'll do a three strand splice of rope. Okay, and it's just basically reweaving it together. That's all it is. And this actually still holds pretty well. And when I used to tan outside, when I had a house, I used to tan outside, and I used to have rope similar to this that I had to splice together in order to work my rawhide to soften it, and to work the I did traditional brain tanning with it, so to work the brain matter through the oils through the dermis. So this works pretty well. So we'll revisit it again. You know, please, again, as the cool kids say, like, subscribe, share. Feel free to share some of your knots or different venues. Again, I watch my comments, so you know, let me know, and I will make sure that the adequate information gets spread out to people. And there you go. It's just something new, something that I keep in the back of my head, and it works in a pinch.